this tutorial, I'll show you how to use BCC Flutter Cut in Premiere Pro. Hi, here I am in Premiere Pro, and I've got a pre-rendered timeline showing some footage of cats in the jungle, and then some transitions which go into a title sequence. So the purpose of this tutorial is to introduce you to Flutter Cut, which you can see an example of right here, and again right here. There were other new transitions in this timeline, BCC 9 transitions like film, glow, dissolve, composite dissolve, and even blobs wipe there. So look up those transitions too, cool new features in BCC 9, but this is just about this part here, the Flutter Cut. Okay, so what is a Flutter Cut? Well, it's basically cutting rapidly between two images, as you can see here. So how do you set it up? How does it look at default? Let's find out. So we've got a new timeline here, just between these two clips of the cats. And if I just take Flutter Cut, which is in the BCC 9 transitions category here, and apply it in between these two clips, we get like a strobe effect. At default settings, the incoming and outgoing clips get equal exposure. So we're seeing 2 frames of each one, and you can modify that. So if you go into the effect controls, the controls for Flutter Cut are kind of unique. You don't have like a % done or an animation group. You just control the start and end frames for the outgoing and incoming clip. So at default, like I said, you get 2 frames each. Let's say I increase the outgoing start frames to 10 and the end frames to 1. So if I play this back, you can see how that changes. So now we stayed on this clip longer. The incoming clip was still just 2 frames. So I have a little image here to kind of explain this. If you look at it like this, so this is sort of what's going on here. You have the outgoing frame count and the incoming frame count, and no matter what, these two values are independent of each other. So if you tell the outgoing to be 10 frames, it's always going to show you 10 frames of the outgoing clip. And if you tell the incoming to start at 1 and end at 10, it's going to change the amount of frames over time. So you'll start with just 1 frame, and then somewhere in the middle you'll see 5 frames of it, and then it'll end at 10. Now this middle value here is not something you can control directly. The filter will be in charge of animating that value for you. So if I do that again here, so again we started at 10 and went to 1. So if I start at like 20 and go to 2 and play it back, okay, you see we don't actually see that much fluttering at all. Keep in mind the transition itself is probably a second or less in duration. So these are real frames here. If your transition's only 30 frames and you're holding on the first clip for 20 of them, you're not going to see a lot of the other footage. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you set these up, that these are actual frame values that take up real time in your timeline. And another picture which kind of illustrates that is this one here. So if they're both changing, again, the numbers are independent from each other. So if this starts at 2 and ends at 6, you're going to have 2 frames of the outgoing, and then the 1 frame of the incoming, then the 4 frames of the outgoing, 5, then the 6 of the outgoing, etc. Okay, just to show you visually what's happening with these frames, because this does play back very quickly, and it might be a little hard to follow. Okay, so that's how the frame count works, but now let's use it intentionally. So I'm just going to reset everything here. Let's have our outgoing clip sort of fade out. So we're going to have it start with longer frames, like maybe 6, and end with 1. And if I play that back, you can see how this incoming clip seems to speed up. That's good. Now let's add a fade. The fade in both settings is like a cross dissolve. So if I turn this up to 100, then the incoming clip is going to be cross dissolving on top of the cuts. It makes it a lot softer. Just to show you what that does, I'm not going to use it here. The same thing for the outgoing fade out. It gives it like a cross dissolve out. Again, it softens the cuts a little bit. Looks pretty good actually in this case, but I don't want it for here. Okay, then you have colors and effects. So colors are great. It defaults to white and black. So if I say the color 1 frames to be 2, and I change the order to be after outgoing, so if I go through frame by frame, we get the 6 frames that I start here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll get 2 frames of the color white. There's the 2, and then the 2 frames of the incoming clip, 1, 2, and then it'll repeat. 2 frames of the white, and then back to the incoming. So you have 2 colors you can choose from, and they don't have to be colors. I can change the color to a layer. So the layer underneath the footage can be called up instead. So that gives you a different effect. You play it back. Also, keep in mind that this Flutter Cut transition can also be used as a filter. So you can use it to actually just generate strobe kind of effects in the footage. Not going to get into that now, but it'd be the same kind of thing you're doing here. It's the same UI for the filter. Anyway, so you can use footage instead of a color, but let's go back to making this just white, and after it's white, let's give it a black frame of just 1, and we're going to have it happen after both. That means we're going to see our outgoing clip, the 6 frames, there's the color white for 2 frames, black for 1, here's our incoming clip, but then we see black again. So the color's happening after both. And that will repeat consistently throughout the transition. It gives you kind of a very flashy dissolve there. And the last thing about the Flutter Cut are the effects. So you have invert and monochrome, or invert monochrome. So if I change the target to outgoing, you can see it actually inverts the outgoing clip. It gives it a much more startling look. If I change the effect to monochrome, again, it does stand out a bit more, but not quite as much as invert does. Or you can go invert monochrome and really look terrifying, like lions. They're scary, I guess. All right. And if you're not happy with just selecting outgoing, incoming, or both, you can create a custom pattern here. So you can tell it how many frames should be normal, that means no effect, how many frames should then have the effect. So here's our 2 normal frames, here's our 2 effect frames, and then here's the 2 normal frames after it. So that is how you can set up your own custom pattern with this filter. Okay, so that's kind of a lot to take in, but that is everything to do with the Flutter Cut transition. I tend to like having the flash of colors in between. It does a nice job of breaking it up. I tend to not do really quick frame counts, so I like to keep them a little bit longer so it's more of a relaxed kind of cut rather than a really, really fast strobe effect. Just to show you what that would look like though, let's set everything here to 1. And hopefully it won't trigger any seizures in the audience, but yeah, so again, you can get really quick with this. You can play with the timing, experiment, and find a pattern that you like. But there you go. So using the Flutter Cut transition in Premiere. So if you liked what you saw here and want to learn more, check out our website or even download a free trial version of our product, and that's at borisfx.com.